ABC 10 News at 6 starts now.
San Diego will stay in the state's second most restrictive reopening tier and likely for some time. Good evening, I'm Kimberly Hunt.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. While businesses continue to operate at their current capacity, our ABC 10 News reporter Rachel Bianco looks at the county's new plan to make sure that everyone has equal access to COVID care.
San Diego County remains in the second least restrictive or red tier. Tuesday, health officials detailed their plan to help reduce infection rates in the hard-hit Latino communities.
Definitely making sure that we're paying attention to our most impacted communities is the only way that we're going to move forward. So, we think this is a great step.
Under the state's new health equity metric, the county is divided into 4 regions set by the state's Healthy Places Index. Each area gets a score based on factors that include income, education, social, transportation, and health care. This map shows the healthiest communities in dark green. Dark blue is the least healthy. The black dots symbolize COVID-19 testing sites.
San Diego has been doing the work needed to resolve barriers and has focused on the interventions where there is disproportionate impact of COVID-19.
The complex plan focuses on testing, tracing, isolation, and treatment and worker protections.
It's not enough just to translate information. It has to be done in a way that's culturally relevant.
Nancy Maldonado with the Chicano Federation says there is still a lot of misinformation about testing.
Making sure that the community understands that it's free, that there's no charge for testing, that it's confidential, and that there are resources available should someone test positive.
Latinos make up 34% of San Diego's population, but more than 60% of the COVID cases.
And I hope that people take this as a call to action, that now we can finally say that we are all in this together.
Right now, the county's health equity is 5.7%. That is almost double the county's average positive testing percentage. Rachel Bianco, ABC 10 News.
Failing to meet the equity metric can't push a county back into a more restrictive tier, but it can prevent it from moving ahead. The county's rolling average for positive COVID tests continues to hold flat at just under 3%. It's been about a week since the numbers first dropped this low. Today's positive tests account for 278 new cases. That brings our total to just over 51,000. The county also reported its highest number of deaths in some time today with 14, but that's from October 3rd through the 11th. That brings the total now to 840.
As parts of the county deal with a heat advisory this week, CAL FIRE says it's ready to respond during the heightened risk for fire. The majority of their firefighting resources that were sent across the state to deal with other wildfires have now returned to San Diego. CAL FIRE says no one should let their guard down.
The fact that the winds aren't there, it does not help us sleep at night. I mean, we're still very dry. It's still October, and we know that even though there aren't winds now, we can bet money that there will be winds later.
CAL FIRE is asking the public not to do anything that can spark a fire, especially with the brush so dry. They urge everyone in high fire risk areas to have a go bag prepared. Halfway through October, these are summer-like temperatures. Meteorologist Angelica Campos joining us now with a look. Hi, Angelica.
Hi, Kim. It's very dangerous. The heat, the fire, danger. So let's take a look at some of today's records. We didn't break a record in San Diego. We did make it to 90 degrees, and that is well above the average for this time of the year. The record was 94. We did break a record in Poway and also in Chula Vista. In Carlsbad, we tied a record. In Campo, we got very close to the record, only by a degree. And in Vista, 3 degrees shy from the record of 97. So clearly a pretty hot day across the county. And just to show you how dry it is out there, you can see relative humidity ranging from 14% in Alpine to 18% in Julian, 11% in Warner Springs. We do anticipate the chance of Santa Ana winds late Thursday into Friday, so the heat will continue and conditions could become even drier, bringing our elevated fire danger to critical conditions for the end of the week. Coming up, I'll show you what to expect day by day in your 7-day forecast.
Angelica, thank you. It looks as if the 49th Congressional District is now in the North County will stay with Democrats for at least another 2 years. According to our latest ABC 10 News Union Tribune scientific poll, Democratic incumbent Mike Levin has seen his lead grow over Republican challenger Brian Marriott over the past month. There are 20 percentage points now dividing those two candidates. So joining us once again this week to talk about the poll is Dr. Kira Green with the Center on Policy Initiative. So Dr. Green, thank you for joining us first of all.
Hello.
Mike Levin's lead in our last poll was a little more than just 10%. So this is now a huge jump with these new numbers. So what contributed to the growth in support for Levin over the past month?
One of the big things about Mike Levin's lead is that it's really coming from strong showings, both from Democrats, but also from independent voters in this district. And it's really on pace with what's happening nationally for Democratic candidates.
Our Republican Darrell Issa, as we know, held this district for about 20 years. So is this now a sign that the 49th is now firmly in the hands of Democrats?
Of course, we should never assume that anything is, we know the results until we have an election, but it is a pretty dramatic swing. As recently as 2014, Darrell Issa was winning this district with about 60% of the vote. And Mike Levin is nearly there with 56% of the vote, both in 2018, and he looks on track to do that again. So I think it is a sign that this district has moved into Democratic hands. It's a safer seat for Democrats than you might have expected so soon after a strong Republican showing in this district.
As you mentioned, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we're now more than a week into early voting. Nearly 15% of voters polled in the 49th. They have already returned their ballots. Among those votes already cast, Levin holds a 40-point lead over Marriott. So what should Marriott focus on here in the final weeks to try and generate support from those people who do plan to vote in person on Election Day?
I think it's a tough go for Marriott. One, it's because there are relatively few undecided voters in this race. It's only about 7% in the poll. Further, I think the challenge is those voters who are currently polling and showing support strongly are supporting their candidate. So those Mike Levin voters are pretty enthusiastically voting for Levin, view their vote as for him, not one against Marriott. So I think then the focus has to become maybe a focus on turnout, although that's getting tougher and tougher because so many people have already voted and are planning to vote by mail really soon.
We are a county that loves to vote early. 3 weeks to Election Day. Dr. Kira Green, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
President Trump has repeatedly called on his supporters to watch what's happening at their polling places. And that's essentially a poll watcher. But what exactly can a poll watcher do? ABC 10 News anchor Derek Stahl is going in depth to explain the rules and why some California election officials are concerned.
They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen. I hope you're all going to be poll watchers. I hope you are.
For weeks, President Trump and his son Don Jr. have been recruiting tens of thousands of volunteer poll watchers for what they're calling the Army for Trump.
We need every able-bodied man, woman to join Army for Trump's election security operation.
In response, California's Secretary of State sent out a memo last week to county election officials, urging them to be prepared for potential cases of voter intimidation.
I think the operative term here is that they have the right to observe. They do not have the right to interfere and intimidate.
Election observers can monitor what goes on at polling places or at the Registrar of Voters' office, where the ballots are processed and counted. Observers have been part of U.S. elections since the 1700s. Anyone can be an observer in California, but they're often partisan volunteers supplied by campaigns or political parties.
The fact you have two opposing sides engaging in this poll watching activity keeps each side honest.
Attorney Dan Eaton says the idea is to promote transparency and public trust, and it's all carefully spelled out in state law. Observers can take notes and record video of election workers, but they cannot touch any voting materials or equipment. They can speak with poll workers, but they cannot communicate with voters.
People can't show up and kind of block the path or taunt or jeer or, give voters any hassle or trouble when they're trying to engage in their civic duties. So
Pam Smith is with Verified Voting. She says there are strict rules on what observers can wear, nothing with political messaging and nothing that resembles a security guard, a tactic that was used to suppress Latino voters in Orange County in 1988.
Well, if you look at voting rights over many years, there has been a history of voter intimidation, people showing up armed in front of polling places.
Violators can be charged with a felony. So what can they do? Poll watchers are there to observe and report discrepancies, and they get access to the roster of voters that's posted at polling places. Campaigns use those for last-minute get-out-the-vote efforts. Then there's a different kind of election observer at the Registrar of Voters' office. These partisan observers can challenge mail-in ballots over discrepancies as they're processed, and they can potentially get ballots tossed out.
There's a dozen different things you look for.
Political analyst John Dadian says there are often challenges over the signature on the mail-in ballot or whether the oval is properly filled in. And he says in tight races, these kind of observers can have an impact. Take the San Diego mayor's race in 2004.
One candidate, Donna Fry, got several thousand more votes than her opponent, but several thousand votes were discounted, and she did not become mayor. There's an example of where it absolutely made a difference. It changed the whole direction of the city.
There will be added restrictions on election observers this cycle because of the pandemic. In San Diego County, they have to wear a mask, answer a health questionnaire, and stay in a designated area. Derek Stahl, ABC 10 News.